They always decided who I was before I opened my mouth. I learned that early, how people could look at you, measure your clothes, your posture, your silence, and reduce your entire existence to a single, convenient word. A word they could understand. A word that made them comfortable. For me, that word was admin. I was 26, but in my family's eyes, I was still the girl who didn't need much. The one who managed somehow. The one who never caused trouble, because trouble required someone to care enough to notice. Growing up, I watched my cousins glide through life on family money and loud competence. They were celebrated for small achievements, praised loudly at dinners, defended fiercely when they failed. I was the quiet contrast, the child who learned independence not as a virtue, but as a necessity. No one offered to help with my tuition. No one asked how many shifts I worked while studying. When I graduated, there was no party, no speech, just a nod and a familiar phrase, "Well, at least you're employed." That was how they saw success. I let them. Not because I agreed, but because correcting them took energy I needed elsewhere. At family gatherings, my name was rarely used. I was introduced by function, not identity. She works in an office. She helps with paperwork. She does admin. Each time, the word tightened around my chest like a label slapped onto a box and shoved into storage. Harmless, they thought. Practical. Forgettable. And I became forgettable on purpose. I dressed plainly. I answered politely. I never mentioned late nights, boardrooms, or the fact that my decisions affected people in countries my relatives had never visited. I let them think I fetched coffee and organized calendars. Silence became my armor. But silence has a cost. There were moments, small, sharp moments, when the label cut deeper than I expected. When someone laughed a little too easily. When pity crept into a smile. When a relative said, "You're so humble," as if humility were something I chose, not something forced on me. What they never understood was this: I wasn't hiding because I was ashamed. I was hiding because I was waiting. Waiting for the day when I wouldn't need their approval. When my worth wouldn't rise or fall based on who sat at the head of the table. When the truth, if it came out, would stand on its own without explanation. That day felt closer now. The engagement dinner invitation arrived late, almost as an afterthought. A thin envelope. No warmth. No personal note. Just my name, spelled correctly for once. I stared at it for a long time. I knew what awaited me: polite smiles, casual dismissal, the familiar sting of being reduced to something small. I could already hear it. She's just admin. Still, I accepted. Not because I wanted to belong. But because, for the first time, I was ready to let the label break. And when it did, I wouldn't be the one who fell apart. They would. The restaurant was the kind of place where the lighting was deliberately soft and the chairs were too expensive to be comfortable. Everything whispered wealth: polished marble floors, servers who moved like shadows, menus without prices. It was designed to remind you, subtly and constantly, who belonged. I arrived 5 minutes early. Not early enough to be noticed. Not late enough to be criticized. Nadia was already there, seated at the center of the long table like a queen in rehearsal. Her engagement ring caught the light every time she lifted her hand, and she made sure to lift it often. Her laughter rang clear and confident, the sound of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. When she saw me, her smile flickered, just for a moment, before settling into something polite and tight. "You made it," she said, as if surprised. I nodded. "Congratulations." She thanked me, distracted, already turning back to her fiancé and the story she had been telling. I slid into the chair at the far end of the table, near the edge, where servers could easily forget me. It was a familiar position. I didn't mind. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone. Vacations, venues, guest lists. Who would sit where? Who mattered enough to be mentioned? I listened, answered when spoken to, kept my voice even. Then Nadia stood, tapping her glass lightly with a spoon. "Since everyone's here," she said, smiling brightly, "I thought we'd do proper introductions." My stomach tightened. She moved around the table, presenting each person like an exhibit. Names, careers, impressive titles. Lawyers. Consultants. Entrepreneurs. Every introduction ended with praise. And then she reached me. "This is my cousin," she said, gesturing casually in my direction. "She's just admin." The word landed hard. A few people chuckled politely. Someone murmured, "Oh." Another smiled with soft-eyed sympathy. I felt their assumptions settle on me like dust, small, quiet, unimportant. Nadia laughed, enjoying herself. "She keeps things organized," she added. "Very helpful." More laughter. I lowered my gaze to my napkin, folding it carefully. My pulse beat loud in my ears, but my face stayed calm. Years of practice had taught me how to swallow moments like this without choking. Her parents said nothing. They never did. The server came to take orders, and when it was my turn, he hesitated slightly, eyes flicking toward Nadia, as if checking whether I mattered enough to ask. "I'll have water," I said softly. Nadia smirked. Always so modest. Daniel, her fiancé, watched me then. Not with amusement. With curiosity. His eyes lingered on my face a second longer than necessary, as if something didn't quite fit the story he'd been given. The laughter continued, louder now, buoyed by wine and comfort. I sat among it, separate but present, the familiar ache pressing behind my ribs. Not pain exactly, something duller. The exhaustion of being underestimated. Still, I stayed quiet. Because laughter fades. And I had learned that the truth, when it arrives, doesn't need to shout. It only needs the right moment. And that moment was closer than any of them realized. The laughter was still echoing when Daniel turned his chair slightly toward me. It wasn't abrupt. It wasn't rude. Just a small shift, enough to pull attention without demanding it. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, curious in a way that felt different from the others. "So," he said, meeting my eyes, "what do you actually do?" The table quieted in stages. Conversations trailed off. Glasses paused midair. Nadia rolled her eyes, already smiling like she knew how this would go. "Babe," she said lightly, "she's just..." "One word," I said. The interruption surprised even me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. But it was steady. Clear. The kind of voice you develop when you spend years being ignored and finally decide not to be. Daniel leaned back slightly. "All right. One word." Nadia laughed. "This should be good." I didn't look at her. I looked at him. "Operations." The word settled into the space between us. Silence followed, not awkward, not polite. Heavy. Intent. Like the room itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Nadia frowned. "Operations what?" I took a breath. Not because I was nervous, but because this was the moment I had quietly prepared for over and over again. The moment when hiding stopped serving me. "I oversee operations," I said evenly. "Global. End to end." Daniel's expression changed. His posture straightened. "For which company?" I named it. The reaction wasn't immediate laughter this time. Nadia's parents went still. Her mother's hand tightened around her glass. Her father's brows drew together, calculation flickering behind his eyes. Daniel's face drained of color. "I know that firm," he said slowly. "They handle logistics for sensitive contracts." "Yes." "You're saying you work there?" "I'm saying I run it." Nadia laughed too loudly. "Oh, come on. That's not funny." "I'm not joking." The words fell quietly, but they carried weight. Years of effort. Of long nights and invisible victories. I reached into my bag and placed my card on the table, black, unadorned, final. Daniel picked it up. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He read. The silence deepened until it felt like pressure in my ears. Her mother whispered, that title. Her father swallowed. Nadia stared at the card like it might disappear if she looked long enough. This is some kind of trick. Daniel shook his head slowly. No. It's real. For the first time that night, Nadia looked small. I felt no rush of triumph. No thrill. Just a strange calm. Like setting something heavy down after carrying it too long. I didn't plan to say anything, I said gently. But you asked. Daniel set the card back down carefully, as if it mattered. I'm sorry, he said, to me, not Nadia. I nodded once. And in that moment, I saw it in her eyes. Recognition. Not admiration. Not respect. Fear. Because she finally understood what I had always known. The word she used to shrink me had never defined me. It had only hidden me. And now, there was no place left to hide. I stood slowly, the chair legs whispering against the marble floor. The sound felt louder than it was, as if the room itself had noticed the shift. No one spoke. No one laughed. The truth had risen, and it demanded space. I should go, I said calmly, smoothing my jacket. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me most. Nadia's mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had nothing prepared. No joke. No clever remark. The confidence she wore so easily had cracked, and beneath it was something raw and panicked. Daniel stood too. Wait, he said, not to stop me, but as if he needed a moment to catch up with reality. I had no idea. I met his gaze. You weren't meant to. Her mother finally found her voice. Why didn't you ever tell us, she asked, almost pleading. I considered the question. All the years. All the dinners. All the times I had been spoken over, spoken for, spoken down to. You never asked, I replied gently. That answer landed harder than any accusation. Nadia's father cleared his throat. We may have misjudged you. I smiled, small, polite, distant. You labeled me. That was enough. Nadia pushed her chair back abruptly. You did this on purpose, she snapped. You wanted to humiliate me. I turned to her then, really looked at her. The girl who had always needed an audience. Who had mistaken volume for value. No, I said softly. I wanted to be invisible. You just wouldn't let me. Silence followed. I picked up my bag and walked toward the exit. No one stopped me this time. No one laughed. The servers watched with quiet curiosity as I passed, unaware they were witnessing the end of a story that had taken years to reach its final sentence. Outside, the night air was cool, clean. I inhaled deeply, feeling lighter than I had in years. The aftermath came quickly. 2 days later, Daniel called. His voice was careful, strained. The engagement was over. He spoke about trust, about values, about realizing who someone truly was when they thought no one important was watching. I listened. I said nothing. A week after that, Nadia called. She screamed. She cried. She accused me of stealing her future. I let her finish. You didn't lose him because of me, I said quietly. You lost him because of who you were when you thought I didn't matter. Then I ended the call. The sweetest revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't public. It was private and permanent. Months later, my company reviewed a proposal from her family's business, one they desperately needed approved. I read it carefully. Objectively. Fairly. It wasn't good enough. I rejected it with a single signature. No explanation. No message. And as I closed the file, I felt no bitterness. Only peace. Because the truth had stood up that night, and it never sat back down again.